Gavin Booty, Fundamentals of Human Communication, Speech 3. Three out of five. According to an article updated in 2022, published in the National Library of Medicine, on a global scale, 3 out of every 5 people will die due to a chronic disease related to chronic inflammation. Over half of everyone you know. For the 7 people who live in my household, that makes up 4 of us. Diseases caused by chronic inflammation are deceptively common. If you or anyone you know suffers from stroke, chronic respiratory diseases, heart disorders, cancer, obesity, hypertension, arthritis, they're likely also suffering from chronic inflammation. My mother suffers from hypertension, and my father's a diabetic. From what I understand, my grandfather died from a cocktail of cancer and diabetes when I was quite young. In order to combat these things that plague us, I've done all sorts of research, lived my life in different ways. I've done whole foods, Atkins, keto, and carnivore. What those all have in common is getting me away from foods that have made me bloat, flare up, cause inflammation. The one that did that the most was carnivore, and that's the one that I felt the best on. Everyone should learn what causes an inflammatory response in their own body and ways to reduce it in order to prevent their chance of death by chronic illness caused by inflammation. Today, I'll explain how you manage your inflammation. By beginning, I'll define the general definition of inflammation compared to chronic inflammation. Then I'll discuss common lifestyle choices that induce or exacerbate it. And then finally, we'll take a look at what you can do to combat it, take an active approach, and reduce inflammation in your body. Now, what exactly is the difference between normal inflammation and chronic? Well, first we should define what inflammation is, and it's your body's normal response to an irritant, basically. StatPro's article titled simply Chronic Inflammation, updated in 2022, generally agrees that inflammation is just your body being irritated, and it separates into 2 broad categories based off of the duration. Now, acute inflammation is the normal response to injury, disease, trauma. Traumas being bruises, cuts, scratches, and that sort of thing, as well as things like frostbite, sunburns, allergens, that sort of thing. But when it goes from 2 to 6 weeks and crosses over into the 6+ week category, at that point it becomes chronic, and you start to see relations with many chronic diseases such as cancer, arthritis, diabetes, strange links with things even that are traditionally seen as mental disorders such as autism and depression. Also, things more obvious like rheumatoid arthritis. The difference in process between the 2 is not so much in how they start, but how they end or keep going. With acute inflammation, you have a novel stimulus introduced, and then your body goes through and attempts to deal with it successfully if it's only acute, and then you return to a normal, healthy state. With chronic inflammation, you have an ongoing stimulus, a repeated stimulus, something that keeps happening over and over again. Your body tries to fight it, but is unsuccessful in doing so. Your body is only as capable as it is. It's not going to magically get better, and so you just have a bit of an ongoing cycle at that point. You pass the 6-week barrier, you will get chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation can be caused by a number of things: long-term bacterial or fungal infections, autoimmune diseases in which the body treats itself as a foreign entity, actual foreign entities in the body that enzymes couldn't naturally break down, and even normal but frequently occurring acute inflammation. That being said, there are instances with chronic inflammation that occur without the acute, things like tuberculosis and arthritis, although arthritis is still exacerbated by it. So your body detects something, labels it, says it shouldn't be there. Then you become inflamed, you have acute, and then when it makes it past the 6-week mark, it becomes chronic. So, with that general understanding in mind, what are some things that we can stop doing in the day to day to help lower our inflammation? There are many things that cause it, both in and on the body. It is, after all, a normally occurring process. You can think of it in two categories: external, internal. Um, so things like smoking cause inflammation in the lungs. The food and drink that we imbibe causes inflammation in our gut microbiome. Um, in a 2019 study titled "The Role of Inflammation in Diabetes: Current Concepts and Future Perspectives," it's discussed how high blood sugar or hyperglycemia can cause inflammation as well. It's a bit of a vicious cycle. This is a chart representing the cycle, particularly in type 2 diabetes. We're going to start up here where your body, when you eat something or you drink something with a calorie count. Anything with calories spikes your blood sugar at least a little bit. When you're hyperglycemic, your body creates insulin to try and digest all the sugars that you just ate. It goes down to your muscles, your gut biome, your adipose tissue, your fat cells, but you become inflamed as opposed to dealing with it properly. A little bit of inflammation is fine, it's normal, it's routine, but again, the chronic is where things become an issue. Your body tries to compensate for this by creating more insulin in your pancreas, all the while your body uses insulin less efficiently, and then in order to pick up the slack, your liver has to kick on harder. And then it just goes on and on and on. People who are familiar with type 2 diabetes or metabolic syndrome are very familiar with this kind of cycle. Let's see. Staying on the subject of spiking blood sugar, your body processes foods a little differently based off their macronutrient profile. That's going to be your fats, your proteins, your carbohydrates, carbs, big old spike in blood sugar. Everything you eat or drink spikes your blood sugar, but carbs are going to be the worst offenders. High carb foods, high glycemic index foods, or foods with added sugars to them, you're going to try and avoid. Again, it's okay to splurge every now and again. Being inflamed is perfectly normal. It's like your body stretches to accommodate the fact that you're not living in a sanitized plastic box all day. What we're trying to avoid is repeatedly and egregiously spiking it over a long period of time. However, all this would only begin to scratch the surface of your unavoidable relationship with inflammation in your lifetime. While I could go on and on to talk about what to avoid eating or activities to avoid doing, at the end of the day, this is going to be a discussion to open up with you and your body. Everyone's body is a little different. Every immune system will respond to stimulus in different ways. So with that being said, the two most efficient things you can do to get a lot of things off the table, to check off and say this thing is perfectly fine to run into frequently. The two things you can do are, one, get a patch test done, and two, go on an elimination diet. A patch test is defined by Mayo Clinic. It's also known as an allergy skin test. It's when they expose your skin to a suspected allergen, and then they watch and see whether or not you actually have an allergic reaction to it. This is an example of what one looks like. So you can knock out like 40, 50, 60 things all at once, and depending on severity, you'll get faster or slower responses. But this will just do a lot to help you narrow down what kind of things you can run into on your day-to-day. Pollens, allergens, some people are allergic to cats and dogs and all that lovely stuff. But as far as taking care of the stuff that frequently gets inside of you, the food, the drink, and that kind of thing, what you want to do is go on an elimination diet. 3 weeks, you go ahead, cut down to just a meal that's going to get you by, it's going to fill you up. And then what you want to start doing is going through after you're done. So you could do like potatoes and chicken for 3 weeks, and then one by one start introducing some foods that are commonly causes of food sensitivity. Things like soy, things like grains, things like certain kinds of veggies or meats. Some people are allergic to egg whites, but not egg yolks, sugar, yeast, all that sort of stuff. You can break it up. You give yourself a little chart here. So 21 days eating clean, and you add, say, dairy, and then you wait 2 days. So Sunday dairy, Tuesday, Wednesday, all good. And then uh, after dairy, maybe on Wednesday you add yeast or something like that. You can even go through and organize yourself a nice little monthly calendar, see what all is in store for you the next month. It actually helps you organize your day really, really nicely. I've done one of these before. So that sorts out your external and your internal. What can you do to reduce inflammation that you already have? Make sure you get enough sleep. It's really, really boring, but just following a basic principle of like 5 things. Sleep is going to be at the top. Cortisol spikes blood sugar. It's your stress hormone. You put blood sugar so you're good and ready to go at a moment's notice. But over an extended period of time, high blood sugar, high inflammation, chronic disease. So get sleep, reduce the cortisol, help yourself out. Exercise, also a natural way to go ahead and lower your inflammation, increase blood flow. Sweat can help get rid of toxins in your body. So a lot of stuff that you hear very frequently can help with inflammation. To wrap things up, today I explained the severity of chronic inflammation resulting or exacerbating chronic disease across the world. 3 out of every 5 people. It's quite the stunning number. We also talked about what things are you already doing that are making things worse, things that you can stop. We talked about things that you can start doing to reduce your risk of suffering from chronic inflammation. And as you go through and do these things, I implore you to not only do it for yourself, but do it for those around you. Take the lessons you learned and teach them to others. Let them know that patch testing isn't so scary. Let them know that elimination diets are well worth the wait that you put in. And maybe one day you'll get to be like me and talk with your grandma about how just swapping up some things in her diet basically got rid of her arthritis in her hands. So just learn what causes inflammation and get your family to be part of the other 2 out of 5. Die of old age instead, right? Thank you.
Yay!